Yes.
Yes, I was wondering if they have booklets available with this information until you can make the commercials. How do we know?
Well, there are several ways you can get this kind of information. First of all, you can write us because we document everything we do and we can send you our factual research. Secondly, if you're interested in nutrition, write Food and Drug Administration. They have lots of information. If you're interested in auto safety, write Department of Transportation, Washington, D.C. Usually there's a federal agency that has this information, but they stick it away in books somewhere and it never gets onto television. So what we've done is decided to use television to get the information out.
Yes. You'll stand.
Okay. I'd just like to commend you. I think the counter commercials are really great. For one thing, they don't insult our intelligence. They're not gimmicky or, you know, they don't say, yeah, they're just straightforward, and you can just sit and listen to them, and I really like them. I think they're great.
Do you have any, excuse me,
Yeah,
if I can chat a second. Do you understand the dilemma, though, for the broadcaster?
Yeah, I could see, you know, problem, but okay, advertisers have been living high for a long time, and we've been putting up with it. And I think it's great that finally somebody's come along and says, okay, now look, you just can't go along like this, or, you know, forever.
Who is to decide what counterclaim is to be aired? Now, and presumably it'll be a bunch of fat cats with vests and watch fobs somewhere in a panel office who have no idea.
Well,
Are you talking? Yeah.
He's not.
Thank you.
That's right, he doesn't even wear a vest.
That's right.
No, but you understand the nature of my question. And that doesn't the broadcaster have a right to be anxious about the possibility of even more government
Control?
yeah, an invasion of an industry that's already significantly reviewed by the government?
Why doesn't the industry get their own controls?
That's right.
Why don't they? I mean, they haven't.
We have gone to the industry and asked for that, and they've said, no, we just don't want this stuff on the air. Let me give you an example. The head lawyer for the National Association of Broadcasters was asked this question. Bayer Aspirin ran a campaign a year or so ago holding up a book and saying, our research in the American Medical Association has shown that combinations of pain relievers are not as effective as just plain aspirin, and Bayer is the best. Well, that's very close to what our spot said. The combinations are really not recommended. Get plain aspirin, except we didn't push Bayer. And the general counsel of the NAB was asked, why will you sell time to Bayer and not to the group of doctors that were sponsoring that spot? His answer was, the doctors are too credible. They're too believable. Now, maybe you understand that answer, I don't. Because basically he was saying that it's somehow not correct for doctors to buy time to tell the truth because they're more credible. Whereas Bayer aspirin, perhaps everybody takes it with a grain of salt, and therefore it's okay to put on the air. The point is, we've gone to the industry and they give us what strike me as somewhat illogical answers. The basic point is they're just afraid of us, and they're doing everything they can to keep it off. It makes it very difficult. As to who should decide how these spots get on the air? Well, who decides now? It's the broadcaster. We're asking the broadcaster to still make those decisions, but to do them fairly. Let me give you an example. If there are only 50 seats in a restaurant, someone may get turned away. All we ask is that people get turned away fairly. If they get there too late, they don't get in. But they don't get turned away because they have the wrong color hair, or because they're Catholic, or because they're black. The policy is the restaurant owner makes fair choices as to who gets in. First come, first serve. Well, that's all we want from the broadcast industry. If we're there first in line, our spot gets on. And that doesn't, by the way, require more governmental regulation, but less.
Under what circumstances would you demand free airtime, and under what circumstances would the claimant be obliged to pay for it?
The distinction we would draw is this. If the message is non-commercial, not sponsored, not by an outfit that's making a profit, if the message conveys factual information about products that people ought to have in order to make intelligent choices at the supermarket, and if it's important, if it affects a lot of people instead of some small minor product, and it affects them in a major way, they'll save a lot of money paying 19 cents for 100 aspirin instead of $1.69, then that should be a contender for free time. It's a public service.
So you would want that aspirin spot to be free?
Absolutely, and the
So-
Chevrolet one as well.
Okay, here's what you're asking then. You're asking the broadcaster to provide free time to, in effect, shoot down the effectiveness of a commercial for which companies have paid the broadcaster to air.
Absolutely.
So you're in effect giving the broadcaster a gun and telling him to point it at his head and that he has an obligation to pull the trigger.
See, I don't think that's pointing a gun at his head. I think what will result is more paid commercials from the industries to rebut what's on the air. It will also, as one lady quite correctly said, it will put pressure on existing advertisers to clean up their ads. They just won't be able to get away with all this stuff.
Okay.
For instance, let me give you an example. I mentioned earlier, nobody knows what's in Anacin. Well, Anacin commercials for 20 years have been saying more of the pain reliever that doctors recommend most. Well, do you want to know what the pain reliever is? It's aspirin. Now, if we put that on the air, what's Anacin going to say? Perhaps its aspirin is good quality, and if it can prove it, then its ads will say it. And the net result is better information to the public.
Okay. Cue in the next spot, will you? Speaking
Yeah.
of putting a gun to your head, go ahead.
Well, we also were concerned with water pollution, and we didn't just want to say, do good things. We wanted to tell people what they could do specifically. So we got a friend of ours to explain a law that allows people to turn in a water polluter and collect half the reward, which can be up to $2,000 a day.
Roll film. Is it going to be ready, or you want a little fill? Here it is.
More than 29% of our streams and shorelines are polluted. You can do something about this. In 1899, the government enacted a law posting fines up to $2,500 a day for people caught polluting. And the government will share half that reward with you. I know it's distasteful, this business of turning people in, but pollution is more than distasteful, it's deadly. For more information, write to your Natural Resources Defense Council, New York.
Now, you would want that free, huh?
Sure.
The reason you'd want it free is because it's a factual piece of information informing the people about a law that's on the books.
That's right.
Okay. How about this one? You want to pay for that one?
Yeah, I think that ought to be paid for. In the
All right,
existing
don't tell them what it
system.
is. Let's roll it.
Okay.
If you're ready. Now, this is an example of a counter-commercial or of a presentation, a commercial that you think the preparers and the applicants ought to pay the broadcaster to air.
I think certainly broadcasters ought to sell time for this. And let me say one quick thing about this. This is an example of using advertising to talk about important public issues. And that means all of you in this audience in the country ought to be able to speak through television the way you can speak with a typewriter or a pen.
Roll film.
When they divide up the pie in Washington, do you ever wonder who gets the biggest slice?
Not Orangeburg, that's really...
Now for the general.
Most of your taxes go to pay for wars, past, present, and future. What does your money buy? It buys you Vietnam, and with it, inflation, unemployment, disunity, and death. It buys you bombs instead of schools, defoliation instead of clean air and water, tanks instead of trains, and destroys homes instead of building them. Isn't it time we got out of their country and back into ours? Write your congressman. Tell him you need a bigger piece of the pie now.
You like that?
Now, let me say one thing.